Welcome to Café with Cavanha. It's a pleasure to have with us today John Moseley. John is Chief Commercial Officer at Port of Houston. We invited him to talk about logistics from and to the Port of Houston. Good morning, John.
Good morning or good afternoon, Cavagna. I
Good afternoon.
know now with the time change, we're instead of 2 hours difference, I believe we're now 4 hours difference, or
Yeah,
three or
right.
4 hours difference.
Three
Yes,
hours difference. Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
too.
for having me.
It's a pleasure. John, how the Port of Houston could be compared to similar ports in the U.S.? I mean, in terms of logistics variables, distance, capacity, equipment.
To be honest with you, Cavagna, it's very difficult to compare because the Port of Houston is quite unique. There isn't a port similar to the Port of Houston. The Port of Houston is really considered in the city that's considered the energy capital of the world, or at least of the Western Hemisphere. And so that brings with it some unique qualities and attributes that you don't really find in other ports. It's a multi-purpose port, so we do a lot of different things. Some things that other ports just don't do or don't have the capacity to do. Liquid bulk is a big one, of course. Petroleum. We do a lot of oil. We do a lot of gas. We do a lot of energy-related type of movements. But we're also a container port. We do quite a number of containers. We do a lot of autos, cars, vehicles, food. As a matter of fact, when you combine all the different commercial activities, the types of businesses that are done at the Port of Houston, we're the largest port in the United States, which is something a lot of folks aren't aware of. Even here in the United States, they're not aware that the Port of Houston is actually the largest port in the United States.
Uh,
So, yeah,
Sorry. No, no, no. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so it's the largest port in the country, and of course, oil and gas is our number one activity. We do about 250 plus million tons of cargo every year, and it's the busiest port complex in North America, with nearly 20,000 vessel transits per year. We have about 9,000 or so deep water vessels that call the Port of Houston on an annual basis. So going in 9,000, 10,000, going out 9,000, 10,000. So it's about 20,000 vessel transits a year. On top of that, you have 200,000 barge moves, per year too. So it's a very busy complex. It's double the number of vessels that call the Port of New York, for example, or the Port of LA. It's double the number of activities. So it's very, very busy and quite unique. Quite unique. Here's another thing too, and I'm sorry. Here's another thing. I need to say this. It's very important. We're actually the number one port in the United States for traffic between Brazil and North America. So we are Brazil's number one port in the United States. We do about 9.5 billion dollars. That's 9.5 mil millones de dólares, $9.5 billion worth of trade between Brazil and the Port of Houston, and it's growing at about 8% per year. So as of last month, we're tracking 8% above the previous year in terms of the amount of activity between Brazil and Houston.
It's interesting, John, because geographically position is very attractive for Brazil too, and for the Texas in terms of oil activity. So Houston is a center point for these issues of oil and gas.
It truly is. I mean, energy, oil and gas is really at the epicenter of what we do here in the Port of Houston. But I use an analogy often when I'm speaking with Brazilians and other Latino Americans. What I've noticed in Brazil is that almost everybody uses social media, technology, smartphones. It's a very high tech, very savvy population in Brazil. To get from point A to point B, I notice everybody's using Waze, to get to the place they want to be. And And I use that analogy because in the past, everybody used to use maps, the grid maps to get from one place to another. It was difficult. Well, the same thing with the ports. Most people in Brazil, when they think of a port in the USA, the first port they think of is Miami, because Miami is always that traditional gateway that for 50 years, people from Latin America and from Brazil, they always think Florida, Miami, but Miami today, things have changed in the last several decades, in the last 10, 20 years. Houston has overtaken, Houston is actually 5 times larger than Miami. Miami is a good cruise port. It's a good cruise port. It's a great place to take the family on a holiday. It's nice. You get to go to Orlando and see Mickey Mouse and everybody up there. But when it comes to oil and gas, when it comes to business, when it comes to containers, Houston really is the best place. And you nailed it on that. You hit the nail on the head, Mr. Cavagna. Is that it's really our location. It's the location that we're centrally located, and when you want to penetrate the North American market, there's no better place than Houston, because we're equidistant to West Coast, East
And
Coast,
it's cool.
Central United States. Yeah, the location is excellent. Somebody in Brazil told me last week, I was down there for the Encuentro Nacional de Exportadores Brasileiros, and hosted by the Asociación de Exportadores Brasileiros. And someone told me something funny. I said, "Yeah, Miami is like you have to drive 500 kilometers north and turn left, and then you're in the USA." So it's still, I think Houston really is. Yeah, it's our location more than anything.
And John, exactly the point of Brazil relationship that the Port of Houston are looking for. Uh, what exactly are you doing in terms of Brazilian oil and gas sector, including partnerships you can find here?
Well, this is something that we've been involved in now for the last several years. We overtook New York 10 years ago as the number one gateway for Brazil, and we've been working on it for quite some time now. And a colleague of mine last week reminded me that it was, I believe, in 1986 that we signed our first memorandum of understanding with the Port of Santos. And since that time, we've signed a couple of other MOUs. We signed a memorandum just about a year and a half ago, with the Port of Açu in Rio de Janeiro State, and that was a significant milestone for us. And that that was on top of an MOU, a memorandum of understanding that we'd signed with the Asociación de Exportadores Brasileiros, AEB, in Rio de Janeiro, where we're looking to support the oil and gas industry through the Port of Houston. As we started building that up over the last several years, now with the new administrations in North America and in Brazil, and then the new developments happening in the pre-salt and happening offshore oil and gas in Brazil, the time couldn't be better now for us to do something. So, to answer your question, the reason why we did these things is to build common distribution hubs for logistics between Houston, the epicenter of energy in North America, with Rio de Janeiro state, which is the epicenter for energy in Brazil, in order to A, create efficiencies, make it easier for Brazilian importers, exporters, service providers, whether it's Schlumberger or Halliburton, or the owners, the international oil companies, Petrobras, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Stat Oil, Premier Oil, any of the companies that are operating with the blocks off of the in the offshore sector in Brazil, to make it easier for them to find a place in Houston where they can consolidate cargoes, consolidate orders, consolidate POs, and then from there launch their products in single consolidated shipments to Brazil to better serve them. Imagine if you're receiving 100 different, whether it's casings or fluids or pipe or blowout preventers or valves or fittings or any of these big, very expensive type of products. and you're sourcing all these 100 different things from different places. When you bring them to Brazil, guess what? You have 100 different shipments, 100 different uh, shipments you have to keep an eye on, you have to track, you have to manage, and to bring on time and in place for each different project that you have in Brazil. By the Port of Houston providing one single location where all those orders can be consolidated in a foreign trade zone environment, in a very low cost environment where they're consolidated, then you minimize your risk and you reduce your cost by having a less number of shipments and more dedicated service to go directly to the project site in Brazil, whether it's at Port of Açu or it's at Port of Rio de Janeiro or whatever other port. You can easily then transport in single units those orders rather than managing multiple number of entries or multiple number of orders. That's the idea. That's the concept.
So you have,
Efficiency, cost reduction.
yeah, good. So you have several companies, I mean, ship companies that are doing this specifically for equipment, materials, and for fluids, but it's not for oil and gas themselves.
Not just for oil and gas. Oil and gas, of course, is the big one. I mean, that's really the basis, the foundation of what we're doing. But we're also seeking to diversify. We want to, in the case of the Port of Houston, what we want to do is support imports from Brazil. In other words, exports from Brazil to North America. We support it because for us, we don't just depend on exports only. We want imports in order to maintain balance. When we maintain balance, the ships come full, the ships go back full. That reduces costs, and when you reduce costs, that provides greater benefit to the end user, whether it's JBS or whether it's some big wood exporter or food exporter or whoever it might be. It provides better synergies when we have balance. So for us, imports from Brazil, that is exports from Brazil, supporting exporters, small, medium, large size exporters from Brazil to bring products to North America. We're very supportive of that too. And that's something we work on with our partners in Houston and in Brazil to accomplish.
Excellent, John. Very clear for us, and I would like to thank you. We appreciate this nice conversation, and I know that you are open to have people from Brazil to find you here
Please,
in Brazil.
I have a great team. I've got a lot of great colleagues. We got the Brazil Texas Chamber of Commerce that does some great work. We're working with our consular office of Brazil here. We're working with U.S. Commercial Service. We're working with companies. We've got a lot of partners. But yeah, we're here. We're here to serve. We're here to provide any value we can provide to the Brazilian community interested in doing import export through North America.
Thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you for the
Yes,
conversation.
sir. Happy Thanksgiving. Thank you. Okay.
Given for
Bye
you
bye.
too. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Thank you.